And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and let's talk about what might be the most overplayed card in the entire format, and I think it should be played quite a bit less than it is. I made a video a few months back talking about the most overrated cards in the format, but I missed this one because it is a land, and I hadn't even thought about the lands that might get played way more than they should. There's probably a few lands that I think are probably in more decks than they should be, but the one that is the worst perpetrator, I think, is Evolving Wilds. That's right, one of the most popular cards in the entire format, land or otherwise. In fact, outside of basic lands and obviously Command Tower, it is the most popular land in the Commander format. We see it all the time, and I think it's getting played too much. Way too much, in fact. Now, I will preface this with a few things. First of all, obviously there are places where Evolving Wilds is great. That's the case with every card, right? I just started doing my 10 card series again. There are some really niche fringe cards in there that you're not going to see much, but there is some really great places where they will fit in. And obviously the same is true for any card. Not saying you shouldn't play this card. I'm just saying it's probably in way more decks than it should be. I will also preface this by saying, yes, I know it is in the precons, guys. I get it. It's very much played outside of the precons. And if you bought a precon and it's in there, maybe you should be taking it out, right? That's the whole point of videos like this. So if you've never seen it before because you just started playing Magic yesterday, it is a land. Tap, sacrifice Evolving Wilds, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So I will first start with where you should be playing this card. Obviously, you should be playing this card in a landfall theme because, of course, it gets you 2 landfall triggers. You're going to play it, landfall trigger, crack it, get another land, landfall trigger. Pretty great there. If you just want lands in your graveyard, or if you want to be playing lands from your graveyard, lots of different land themes where it obviously is going to be played where it might normally not be played, right? Heck, even if you had a monocolored landfall deck, you probably might want to play it. I briefly had this card in my Lulu deck because it gets me a revolt trigger, right? I want stuff to be leaving the battlefield in order to get that trigger off of my commander. So Evolving Wilds actually works there. I can crack it, go get a land, and then I'm guaranteed I get that trigger from my commander on the end step. So yes, of course, there's lots of great places to use it. But of course, it's being overused. Way overplayed. Here's the places that I think you should not be playing it. First of all, in a green deck. Any green deck. And yes, other than landfall and the things I already talked about, okay? We've already covered that. So outside of that, why are you putting Evolving Wilds in your green deck? Green already mana fixes incredibly well. This is why ramp is so powerful in the Commander format, because not only does it get you more lands into play faster, it also mana fixes you. And it is so incredibly easy to mana fix with green in the Commander format. There's no reason for you to ever be playing Evolving Wilds. I will also point out that Myriad Landscape, probably a card that's in way too many decks, should also never be in a green deck for the same reason. You don't need the mana fixing and you don't need the ramp, but I digress. Outside of a landfall theme, I don't think you should be playing Evolving Wilds in a green deck ever. Not needed. Where else should you not be playing it? In a 2-color deck. Any 2-color deck. Obviously not the ones that have green, but anything outside of that as well, unless there is a very specific reason to do so. Why not play it in a 2-color deck? Well, because of course, literally any land that adds 2 mana of those colors is better. So let's look at the Snarls, for example, a land cycle that I don't think is very good. A lot of people don't think is very good. They keep reprinting them in precons anyway. I've never used them myself. Furycom Snarl, which enters the battlefield tapped unless you reveal a mountain or plains card from your hand, which I don't love, and it's likely going to enter the battlefield tapped. Now, if I'm on a Boros deck, though, this is going to give me both colors I want and likely enter the battlefield tapped. My Evolving Wilds, what's that going to do? Well, I'm going to play it. I'm going to crack it. I'm going to go get a plains or a mountain, and it's going to enter the battlefield tapped. So now I'm getting a land into play tapped. I mean, I'm getting the color I want, but it's entering the battlefield tapped. Furycom Snarl is giving me both colors I want. For the rest of the game, I'm getting either red or white off of that land, and it also entered the battlefield tapped. And also, it might not enter the battlefield tapped. There is a chance that it enters the battlefield untapped as well. So this is far better than an Evolving Wilds in a Boros deck, and these are real cheap. I mean, you want to budget budget option, this is a budget option for a 2-color land in your Boros deck, or any other color combination for that matter. You should be playing this over in Evolving Wilds. Now, are you in that lands theme in Boros where you got the second sunrise, so you want to fetch a bunch of lands and sack a bunch of lands and then you get them all back? Okay, fine. There is a niche scenario where you might want to be doing that, but every other scenario, Fury Calm Snarl is going to be better for you than is Evolving Wilds, right? It gives you both colors you need, and it actually might not enter the battlefield tapped. Even if you had a Boros Guildgate, which just enters the battlefield tapped and gives you no advantage at all other than the fact that it's a gate, that's still better than Evolving Wilds in your Boros deck, because it's entering the battlefield tapped, which essentially Evolving Wilds is, and is giving you 2 mana, right? It's giving you both colors that you need in your deck, whereas Evolving Wilds is not. It's only giving you the one. I think there's some sort of psychological deception when it comes to Evolving Wilds where people think, hey, it's coming into play untapped, so therefore it's a land that enters the battlefield untapped. But of course, the land you're fetching is entering the battlefield tapped. Yes, you can fetch it on your opponent's end step and then it untaps on your turn. Okay, but the Boros Guildgate is also going to untap on your turn. So you're not up anything here. Any land that taps for the 2 colors that you need in your 2-color deck is going to be superior to an Evolving Wilds. It is likely you should not be playing an Evolving Wilds or any other version, by the way. Terramorphic Expanse, I'll obviously give a mention as well since it's the identical card. Likely you should not be playing those in your 2-color decks. Now let's move on to 3-color decks. This is where things get a little cloudier, and of course the reason why is because there's way less options to add colors that you need, right? If you have a 2-color deck, there's so many options now. Just for, like, again, a Boros deck, I counted 18 lands that will give you both red and white for your Boros deck. I think that's plenty, right? Once we get to 3 colors, of course, there's only actually 2 options, essentially. There is the Triome option, which, yes, those are pretty expensive. And there is the original cycle of 3-color lands that just enters the battlefield tapped and then gives you those 3 colors, which I would be playing in any 3-color deck if I was doing so. Again, just having a land enter the battlefield tapped and give you all the colors you need seems pretty good to me. Now, am I going to play an Evolving Wilds in that situation? Now I'm sort of a maybe. I will definitely not tell you not to do that. However, I will say it kind of gets worse at the same time, right? Because even though you don't have a lot of options for lands that give you 3 colors, your Evolving Wilds again is only giving you 1 color. If you're in a Mardu deck, you got your Nomad Outpost, it's giving you all 3 colors you need. Your Evolving Wilds is only giving you 1 color. And I imagine a lot of people have been in the situation where I'm on like turn 2 or 3 here. I have my Evolving Wilds in play. I'm going to crack it and get a what? Am I going to get a mountain, a plains, a swamp? I really need those 3 colors. And Evolving Wilds is only giving me 1. That kind of sucks, right? It can be good because it can get you exactly that color you need in that moment. But going forward, again, you're only getting a basic land. It's only getting you that 1 color. I will also point out there are stuff like Blood Moon out there that exists, stuff that hates on non-basic lands. And it also is a possibility that any non-basic land hate will also hurt you here as well. I've seen that happen more times than I can count. That's also another reason to not put it in your deck. And I know people will say, okay, well, I'm just going to replace a basic land with my Evolving Wilds. I mean, it's not the best option ever, but it is maybe better. And in fact, I've seen people replace a basic land with an Evolving Wilds in their monocolored decks. Why would you ever do that, right? And of course, the other reason that people will give me here for playing an Evolving Wilds is, I think, a really bad one, which is it thins out your deck. That's a bad argument, and I'm going to get into a little bit of a different discussion here with the rest of this video, which involves fetch lands and thinning out your deck. And I think a lot of people play cards like Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse because they thin out your deck, which I always thought was the worst argument ever. Great thing to do in a format like Modern, because the 3 lands you have in your opening hand are the only lands that you need. Your whole entire deck can be cast for 3 mana. In Commander, that doesn't happen very often. In fact, almost never. You want to be making land land drops all the time. In fact, I've heard people say you want to be making land drops every single turn of the game. That seems a bit extreme to me, but a lot of people want to be doing that. If you're thinning out your deck, all you're doing is decreasing the chance that you're going to draw lands later on. So it decreases the chances that you're going to make land drops. That doesn't seem good to me. If I play a turn 1 Evolving Wilds and go fetch another land out of my deck, I've now lessened the amount of lands in my deck. So on turn 1, I have now decreased my land count in my deck so that I have a less chance of drawing one on later turns. Why do you want to do that? Why do you want less lands in your deck at the start of the game? I mean, later in the game, that seems like a better play, but again, Evolving Wilds just becomes essentially a land that enters the battlefield tapped later in the game, which you definitely don't want that either, right? I've seen people put Evolving Wilds in monocolored decks or off-color fetches in monocolored decks or any other deck just to thin out their deck. Terrible decision, in my opinion. Again, is there a specific reason you're doing that? Actually think it through. Why do you want to thin out your deck and get the lands out of your deck? Don't you want to make land drops every turn? That seems pretty good in Commander. So anyone tackling that argument as well, I don't think it's a great one. It is entirely likely that Evolving Wilds is the most overplayed card in the entire Commander format. It's probably in way too many decks, in my opinion. Take it out of your green decks, take it out of your 2-color decks. If you're in that landfall deck or any theme where you specifically want what it's doing, okay, fine, great. Maybe you want lands in your graveyard, or you just want stuff in your graveyard. Maybe you want to be descending. Certainly there are lots of decks that are doing that. Probably not the amount of decks that are currently running it. Yes, I realize this in the precons, but when you buy that precon, the first card you should be taking out possibly is that Evolving Wilds. Replace it with a basic land. You might be doing yourself a favor. This card is getting played too much in the Commander format, I think. You guys let me know, though, in the comments below what you think. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.